Everyone walked past the old man lying by the road until a barefoot girl with nothing to her name knelt beside him, unaware she just saved a billionaire's life and changed her own. It was a hot afternoon in Lagos. The sun burned bright over the busy streets of Lagos. Cars honked, traders shouted, and people rushed past, each person chasing their own day. By the roadside, an old man walked slowly, leaning on a small stick. His clothes were plain and dusty, his shoes worn from the long walk. No one would have guessed that this tired-looking man was Chief Okon, one of the richest men in Lagos. That afternoon, he chose to dress like an ordinary Lagos resident, just another face in the crowd. But as he made his way down the busy street, a sharp pain struck his chest. He gasped, clutched his heart, and before anyone could notice, he collapsed by the roadside. People saw him fall, but they did nothing. A Kiki driver slowed down, stared for a moment, and drove away. A woman selling oranges said, "Ah, this Lagos is not safe. Maybe he is pretending," and moved her tray away. Others just passed by. Minutes turned into an hour. The old man lay there, weak and tired, watching feet hurry past him. Then came Mara. She was a young girl, only 23, walking on the hot road with worn-out slippers. Her cloth was old. Her hands held a small nylon bag with bread and a car inside. Food for her 2 little brothers waiting at home. Sweat ran down her face, but she didn't stop walking until she saw the man. He looked so helpless, lying close to the gutter. His lips were dry and his hand was shaking. Mara stopped. She looked around. Nobody was helping him. She whispered to herself, "Should I help him? What if he's dangerous? What if people laugh at me?" But her heart beat faster. She couldn't walk away. She dropped her bag of food and ran to him. "Baba, can you hear me?" she asked softly, kneeling beside him. He tried to speak, but only a weak sound came out. Mara quickly took her small bottle of water, lifted his head gently, and helped him drink. Then she removed her wrapper and covered him from the sun. "Please, somebody help. This man is sick," she cried, waving at passing cars. Most people ignored her. Some just looked and kept walking. But one kind man finally stopped his taxi and helped her lift the old man inside. "Where should we go?" the driver asked. "Take us to the nearest hospital?" Mara said, holding the old man's hand tightly. "Please hurry." The taxi rushed through the busy road, honking as it passed cars and motorbikes. Mara sat beside the old man holding his hand tight. His eyes were half closed and he breathed weakly. "Don't worry, Bubba," she whispered. "You will be fine. We are almost there." They reached a small hospital. Mara jumped out and called for help. Nurses came quickly and placed the man on a stretcher. They pushed him inside while Mara followed close behind. After some time, a doctor came out and said, "He will be okay, but he needs to rest." "What is your relationship with him?" Mara looked down. "I don't know him, sir. I just saw him by the roadside. Everyone was walking past." The doctor looked surprised. "You helped a stranger. That is very good of you, young lady. The world needs more hearts like yours." Mara smiled shyly. She sat by the waiting bench, her stomach growling. She had not eaten since morning, and the food she bought for her brothers was still in the taxi. But she didn't want to leave the old man alone. Hours passed. The old man finally opened his eyes. He saw Mara sitting quietly in the corner, still waiting. "You stayed?" he asked weakly. "Yes, Bubba," she said softly. "You fainted on the road. I couldn't leave you there." He looked at her for a long time. There was something kind in her eyes. Something he hadn't seen in a long while. "What is your name, my child?" he asked. "Mara," she answered. "I live in Makoko with my 2 brothers." The old man nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mara. You have a good heart." She smiled. "Rest now, Bubba. You will be fine." She sat there until it was almost night. Then she whispered to the nurse, "Please take care of. I will come back tomorrow." She walked out of the hospital, tired and hungry, but her heart was light. She didn't know that the man she helped was not a poor old stranger, but a billionaire who would soon change her life forever. The small hospital was quiet that evening. The smell of medicine filled the air, and the lights flickered softly above Chief Okon's bed. He was still resting when the door suddenly burst open. A tall young man in a clean white shirt rushed in, his face full of worry. "Father, are you all right?" he shouted, running to the bedside. Chief Okon smiled weakly. "David, you came." "Of course I came," David said, holding his father's hand. "I was in a meeting when I got the call. You scared everyone. What happened?" Chief Okon sighed. "Just a little weakness. Nothing serious." David turned to the doctor. "Please tell me the truth, doctor. Is my father okay?" The doctor nodded. "He's fine now." A kind young woman brought him in. She stayed until evening before leaving. Without her, he might not have made it. David looked surprised. "A woman? Who is she?" "We don't know much about her," the doctor said. "She said her name is Mara." David frowned slightly, thinking, Mara? He had never heard that name before. Chief Okon smiled faintly, remembering her face. "Find her, my son. She's special." David chuckled. "Father, you just met her once." Chief Okon looked into his son's eyes. Sometimes once is enough to know a true heart. That night, David stayed beside his father, but his thoughts kept returning to the stranger who had saved him. He wondered what kind of person would help a poor-looking man on the roadside without asking for anything. The next afternoon, when the sun was bright again, Mara came back to the hospital. Her wrapper was neatly tied, and she held a small food flask in her hand. Inside was rice and stew. Simple but made with care. She walked into the ward quietly. When she saw Chief Okon awake, she smiled. "Good afternoon, Bubba. I brought you some food." Chief Okon's eyes lit up. "Ah, Mara, you came back," but before Mara could reply, she noticed someone else in the room. A young man stood by the window reading a message on his phone. When he turned around, their eyes met. David looked at her with surprise. She was younger than he imagined, her face gentle, her clothes simple. She looked shy but strong. "You must be Mara," he said kindly. "My father told me about you." "I'm David," Mara nodded politely. "Good afternoon, sir." "You saved his life," David said. "Thank you for what you did." Most people would have walked away. Mara smiled a little. "Anyone could have helped. I just did what felt right." David watched her as she set the food on the table and adjusted the old man's pillow. Her hands were careful, her voice soft. Something about her felt pure. Chief Okon smiled to himself. "David, this is the kind of heart money cannot buy." David didn't reply, but he couldn't stop looking at the barefoot girl who had saved his father and didn't even ask for a reward. After Mara helped Chief Okon eat a few spoonfuls of rice, she wiped his hands gently and smiled. "You must rest, Baba," she said softly. "Don't worry about anything." David stood quietly beside them watching. He had seen many rich people pretend to care, but this young woman's kindness was different. She looked tired, yet she smiled like she had peace in her heart. When she finished packing up the food flask, she turned to leave. "I should go now," Mara said. "My brothers are waiting for me at home." "Wait, my child," Chia said, reaching for her hand. "You've done more than I can ever repay." Mara shook her head quickly. "Please, Bubba, don't say that. You don't owe me anything. I'm just happy you're better." Chief Okon's eyes softened. "Still, I want to thank you properly. Can you write down your address for me?" Mara hesitated. "It's not a nice place, sir. I live in Makoko near the water." "That's all right," he said, smiling. "Good hearts can live anywhere." She smiled shyly, then tore a small piece of paper from an old receipt in her bag. She wrote her name and a simple direction to her home. "Here, Bubba." "Thank you, my daughter," he said gently. She waved goodbye to them both. "Goodbye, sir," she said to David politely before walking away. David watched her go. Something inside him felt strange, a quiet pull, like he had just met someone important without knowing why. When she left, the hospital room fell silent for a moment. Then Chief Okon turned to his son. "What do you think of her?" David smiled faintly. "She seems kind, father, but she's just a stranger who helped." Chief Okon chuckled softly. "Kindness from a stranger is rarer than gold these days." He looked out the window, his mind already turning with ideas. "David," he said in a thoughtful tone, "you have met many women, rich, educated, beautiful, yet you trust none. Maybe it's time you met someone who doesn't care about money. David frowned a little. Father, please don't start another plan. You know how I feel about Chief Okon raised a hand. No more words, my son. I have seen something in that girl's heart. The way she looked at me, the way she spoke. She reminds me of your mother when she was young. David sighed. Father, you just had a health scare. Maybe you should rest and stop thinking about matchmaking. Chief Okon smiled to himself. We shall see, my son. Sometimes destiny hides in simple places, even by the roadside. That night, as the city lights of Lagos glowed outside the hospital window, Chief Okon lay awake, thinking about Mara. He had tested the world's kindness and found only one heart that stopped for him. He decided before the week ended he would visit her. It had been 3 days since Mara last saw the old man at the hospital. Life in Makoko went on as usual. Noisy, crowded, and full of struggle. Mara sat by her small wooden table, sewing a torn school uniform for a neighbor's child. Her 2 brothers played nearby with empty tins, pretending they were cars. The smell of fish and smoke filled the air. She sighed softly. There was hardly enough food left for dinner, but she was thankful the old man she helped was safe and strong now. She didn't know he had spent those 3 days thinking about her. Far away, in a large mansion with shining marble floors and tall glass windows, Chief Okon sat in his favorite armchair, smiling. His son, David, stood beside him. Are you sure about this, father? David asked. She doesn't know who you are. That's the point, Chief Okon said with a laugh. I want to pay her a visit. I owe that young woman my life, and maybe, just maybe, she will teach us both something about gratitude. So that morning, 3 black cars rolled out of the mansion's gate. Security men followed behind. People on the streets turned their heads as the cars passed by. When the cars stopped at the narrow street of Makoko, children ran after them shouting, "Big men don't camo. Say motor." Mara heard the noise and looked outside. What is happening? She asked a neighbor. I don't know, the woman said. But they are stopping near your house. Mara froze. The loud sound of car doors opening filled the air. Then, to her greatest shock, the old man from the hospital stepped out. But this time, he looked completely different. He wore a fine white agata and shiny shoes. Several guards followed behind him. Mara's heart almost stopped. Baba, she whispered in surprise. Is that really you? Chief Okon smiled warmly. Yes, my dear. It's me, Chief Okon. I came to see the young woman who saved my life. The neighbors stared, whispering in amazement. Some even came out of their shacks to see what was happening. Mara hurried to him, confused and shy. Sir, how is this possible? Chief Okon chuckled. You didn't need to know, my child. That's why your kindness touched me even more. He looked around the narrow street, then turned back to her. Please, will you do me a favor? What favor, sir? She asked quietly. Join me for lunch, he said kindly. Mixed jollof rice and plantain that could win a prize. Mara's mouth fell open. Lunch in your house? Yes, he said with a wink. You already helped me once. Now it's my turn to feed you. Mara looked at her brothers who stood behind her wide-eyed, speechless. But sir, my clothes? Don't worry about that. Chief Okon interrupted gently. You are perfect just as you are. Come, he motioned to his driver, who opened the car door for her. Mara hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and stepped inside. Her brothers waved and shouted excitedly as the cars drove away. The ride felt like a dream. The air inside the car was cool, and the seats were soft like clouds. Mara looked out the window, wondering how her simple act of kindness had brought her here. The cars rolled through the wide streets of Ikoyi, passing tall gates and shining houses. Mara's eyes grew wide as she looked out the window. She had never been to this part of Laros before. Everything looked bright, calm, and clean, so different from Makoko. When the cars stopped, the driver came around to open her door. Mara stepped out slowly, her feet touching the smooth marble driveway. In front of her stood a huge white mansion with golden doors and flower gardens that stretched as far as she could see. The walls sparkled in the sunlight. Welcome to my home, Chief Okon said kindly. Please feel comfortable. Mara could hardly speak. She had never imagined such beauty in real life. The floor was so clean she could see her reflection on it. Two maids came to greet them, bowing politely. "Take her to the dining room," Chief Okon said. "And please bring her a drink." Mara followed, her heart beating fast. The dining table was long and shiny, filled with plates of jollof rice, fried plantain, grilled chicken, and fruit juice. She stood still, afraid to sit until Chief Okon smiled and said, "Please, my dear, eat freely. You are my special guest." She sat slowly. Her hands trembled as she lifted the spoon. "Sir, I've never eaten in a place like this before." Chief Okon laughed softly. "And I have never been helped by someone so humble. Life is full of surprises, isn't it?" Mara smiled shyly. "Yes, sir." Just then, footsteps echoed behind them. Mara turned and her heart skipped. It was the young man from the hospital. "Father," David said as he entered, "you didn't tell me we were having a guest." Chief Okon grinned. David. Meet the young woman who saved my life." David looked surprised. Mara stood up quickly. "Good afternoon, sir." David nodded politely. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I didn't expect to be here either," Mara said with a small laugh. "Your father invited me for lunch." "Well," David said, taking a seat opposite her, "you deserve much more than lunch." Mara's cheeks turned warm. "Please, sir, don't say that. I only did what anyone should do." Chief Okon smiled between them, watching quietly. He could see something gentle in the way David looked at her, and something shy in the way she avoided his gaze. They ate together, talking softly. Chief Okon asked Mara about her life, her brothers, her work as a seamstress, and her dreams. "I just want to open a small sewing shop," Mara said, "so I can make clothes and take care of my brothers." David listened silently. He was used to hearing women talk about money, cars, and parties, but this girl spoke only of hard work and family. After the meal, Chief Okon said, "Mara, would you like to see the garden?" She nodded happily and they walked outside together. The garden was full of roses, butterflies, and small water fountains. The air smelled sweet and calm. Mara stopped beside a tall tree and whispered, "This place feels like another world." Chief Okon smiled. "Maybe one day the two worlds, yours and mine, will meet for good." Mara didn't understand what he meant, but she smiled anyway. Her heart felt warm and a little scared. She didn't know that this visit was just the beginning of something far bigger than she could imagine. Mara sat quietly in the car on her way back home, her heart still dancing. The pictures of the mansion, the food, and the beautiful garden played again and again in her mind like a dream. She had never met people so kind, and she couldn't stop thinking about the young man with gentle eyes who barely smiled but spoke so softly. David, earlier in the garden, the breeze had been light and sweet. The golden sun touched everything, and even the birds seemed to sing softer that day. Chief Okon had gone inside to take a call, leaving Mara and David walking alone among the flowers. At first, they didn't say much. Mara stared at the petals, afraid to meet his eyes. David glanced at her from time to time, curious about the quiet girl who had saved his father's life without asking for anything. Finally he spoke. "You know," he said, "when my father told me a stranger helped him, I didn't believe it. I thought maybe it was just luck." Mara smiled a little. "Maybe it was luck." He shook his head. "No, I think it was something more. You were the only one who stopped." Mara looked down. "Because I couldn't walk away. If it were my father lying there, I would want someone to help him." David looked at her closely. Her eyes were honest. There was no pride in her words, only simple truth. "You're not like anyone I've met," he said quietly. Mara blushed and tried to laugh it off. "I'm just an ordinary person, sir." He smiled. "Please don't call me sir. Just David." She looked at him surprised. David. The way she said his name softly, shyly made something stir in his chest. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like the son of a billionaire. He just felt human. They kept walking until they reached the fountain. Water sparkled in the sunlight and butterflies fluttered around them. David bent down and picked a small white flower. "Here," he said, handing it to her. Mara looked at it, unsure. "For me?" "Yes, to thank you for saving my father." She took it slowly, smiling shyly. "It's beautiful. I'll keep it." Their eyes met again, and for a moment the world around them grew quiet. No cars, no sounds, just the two of them and the soft rush of water. What they didn't know was that Chief Okon was standing at the corner of the garden, watching them from a distance. A slow smile spread across his face. His plan was working perfectly. He had brought them together on purpose just to see what would happen. And now, seeing the shy smiles and the spark between them, he felt his heart dance with joy. He thought, maybe destiny needed a little push. When David finally noticed his father, he quickly stepped back, clearing his throat. "Father, I didn't see you there." Chief Okon chuckled softly. "Of course you didn't. My garden seems to keep people distracted." Mara laughed nervously, her cheeks warm. "Thank you for the food, sir. You've done too much for me already." "Nonsense," Chief Okon said warmly, walking closer. "You deserve the world, my dear, but go home now. Your brothers are waiting." He turned to his driver. "Please take her home safely and make sure she gets something for the boys too." As the car pulled away, Chief Okon watched from the gate, smiling proudly. Everything was going just as he hoped. That night, the mansion was quiet. The moonlight shone softly through the large windows, painting silver lines across the floor. David stood at his balcony, hands in his pockets, thinking about the girl he had met that afternoon. He could still see her shy smile. The way she had looked at the flowers like they were treasures, and how gently she spoke. "She's different," he whispered to himself, but then he frowned and shook his head. "No, Father probably just wanted to test me again. Maybe he thinks I need to learn another lesson about humility." He sighed deeply. "It's not that simple. People always change when they find out who I am." He turned to look at his reflection in the window. The city lights behind him glittered like stars, but his eyes looked tired. Being a billionaire's son came with everything except trust. Meanwhile, in Makoko, Mara sat by her small table, carefully folding the white flower David had given her between the pages of her old notebook. Her brothers were asleep, their small breaths soft and peaceful. She smiled as she looked at the flower again. It reminded her of the garden, quiet, calm, and full of kindness. But then her smile faded. "What if they were just being nice because they're rich?" she whispered to herself. "People like that don't mix with people like me," she sighed, trying to push the thought away. But her heart didn't listen. The next morning, as she was sweeping outside, a black car stopped near her house. Her neighbors turned to stare again. The driver stepped out with a polite smile. "Are you Miss Mara?" he asked. Mara nodded slowly. "Yes, why?" He handed her a neat brown box wrapped with a ribbon. "From Chief Okon," he said. She opened it carefully. Inside was a brand new sewing machine, shiny and beautiful, with a small note that said, "For the hands that helped without asking." Chief Okon. Mara covered her mouth in surprise. Tears filled her eyes. "A sewing machine," she whispered. He remembered. Her neighbors gathered around, gasping. "Ah, God has remembered you, Mara," one woman shouted. "See your luck," another said. But inside, Mara wasn't sure how to feel. She was happy, yes, but also confused. Why were they being so kind to her? Was it really just gratitude or something else? Back in the mansion, Chief Okon walked into the sitting room where David was reading a newspaper. "Did you send the gift, Father?" David asked quietly. "Yes," Chief Okon said with a smile. "The girl deserves it." David folded the paper and looked at him. "Father, I hope you're not trying to play matchmaker again." Chief Okon raised an eyebrow. "And what if I am?" David sighed. "You can't just pick someone for me, Father. I don't even know her, but you want to?" Chief said with a knowing smile. "Your eyes gave you away the moment you saw her." David said nothing. He looked away, pretending to read again. But he couldn't hide the small smile that formed on his lips. That night, as Mara sewed her brother's torn clothes with her new machine, she thought of David again. She wondered if he even remembered her name or the flower he gave her. Little did she know, far across the city, he was standing by his window, looking up at the same moon, wondering if she was thinking about him, too. Days passed, but David couldn't get Mara out of his mind. He tried to focus on work, meetings, and family duties, but her gentle voice kept echoing in his heart. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her smile, simple, shy, and real. One evening, as Chief Okon sat reading the newspaper, David spoke suddenly. "Father," he said, "I want to visit Makoko." Chief Okon looked up, hiding a smile. "Makoko, that's an unusual choice for a man like you." "I just want to check on Mara," David said quietly. "You said she helped you. I should thank her properly." Chief Okon nodded slowly, pretending to think. "All right, my son, but go as yourself, or will you go as a rich man this time?" David hesitated. "No, I don't want her to see me that way." Chief Okon chuckled, "Then go simply. Sometimes hearts speak clearer when money is silent." The next morning, David dressed in simple clothes, plain trousers, a t-shirt, and sneakers. He told the driver to drop him at the main road near Makoko, and continued on foot. People stared as he walked through the narrow streets filled with water and wooden houses. He saw children running barefoot, women selling food, men fixing nets for fishing. It was noisy and alive, nothing like the quiet world he knew. When he reached the small corner where Mara's sewing table stood, he stopped. She was sitting there sewing a torn wrapper, her hair tied neatly, humming softly to herself. David smiled without meaning to. She looked peaceful even in her little world of struggle. He stepped closer. "Mara," he said softly. She looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. "David, what are you doing here?" "I was nearby." He lied quickly, smiling. "I thought I should check on you." She blinked. "Here in Makoko?" "Why not?" he said, looking around. "It's beautiful in its own way." Mara laughed lightly. "You're the first person I've ever heard say that." He smiled back. "Maybe I'm seeing it differently." They sat together under the old umbrella that shaded her sewing table. David watched as she worked, her hands quick and gentle. "Do you do this every day?" he asked. "Yes," she said, not stopping. "People here don't have much, but they always need mending. If I sew 2 or 3 pieces, I can buy food for the boys." David looked at her with quiet admiration. "You work so hard. You make it look easy." "It's not easy," Mara said, smiling faintly. "But when you have people you love, you find a way." David nodded. Her words sank deep into his heart. He had everything, yet he had never felt that kind of purpose. When a light drizzle began to fall, Mara covered her sewing machine with a cloth. David looked up at the gray clouds and said, "Can I buy you roasted corn?" "I passed a woman selling some near the road." Mara laughed softly. "You buying corn on the street?" He grinned. "Why not? It might be the best corn I've ever tasted." Soon they sat side by side on a low bench, sharing the corn, laughing quietly while people around them stared curiously. It was strange. A rich man and a poor girl, but neither cared. For that moment, the world felt small and simple. When David stood to leave, he said, "I'm glad I came, Mara. You remind me what really matters." She smiled. "And you remind me that kindness still exists." As he walked away, Mara watched him disappear down the street, the sound of his laughter still warm in her ears. She didn't know he would come back again and again. Days turned into weeks, and David kept visiting Makoko, always dressed simply, without his driver or guards. He would arrive early in the morning or just before sunset when the streets were calm and golden. At first, Mara thought he was just being polite. But when he kept coming back, bringing snacks for her brothers, new fabric for her sewing, and stories that made her laugh, she began to realize something was different. One evening, as she was sewing outside, she heard his familiar voice. "Good evening, Taylor," he said playfully. She looked up and laughed. "Good evening, city man. You're back again," he grinned. "Maybe I came for another roasted corn." "You've eaten all the corn in Makako," she teased. "People now call you the rich man who eats corn." David burst into laughter, and for a moment, even the neighbors smiled. They sat side by side as the evening breeze danced around them. Mara's brothers played nearby while David helped her thread the needle. His fingers brushed hers just for a moment, but it was enough to make her heart skip. "You're not very good at sewing," she said, smiling shyly. "I'm learning," he said quietly. "Maybe you can teach me slowly." She looked at him, surprised at the softness in his voice. His eyes met hers, steady, warm, full of something she didn't fully understand yet. For a moment the noise of the market faded. It felt like the world had gone still. Just them sitting close, their hearts beating in rhythm with the gentle splash of water nearby. After a while, he said, "Mara, do you ever wish life was different?" She thought for a long time before answering. "Sometimes," she said softly. "But then I remember. If I had everything, maybe I wouldn't have learned to be strong." David nodded. "You sound wiser than most people I know." "You mean richer people?" She teased again. He smiled. "Maybe both." They both laughed, but when their eyes met again, something lingered. Something neither wanted to say out loud. David took a deep breath. "I don't know what it is about you, Mara. You make me forget the noise of everything else." Her heart fluttered. "And you?" "You make me forget the hard parts of life, even if it's just for a while." Their words hung in the air. Quite real, beautiful. When it grew dark, David stood up slowly. "I should go," he said. "But I'll come again." "Soon," Mara nodded, smiling softly. "I'll pretend to believe you," he chuckled. "Then you'll see I'm a man who keeps his word." He began to walk away, but after a few steps, he turned back and said, "Mara, yes, I like it here," he said simply, "because you're here." Before she could reply, he walked off into the night. Mara stood there for a long time, her heart beating faster than it should. The sound of his footsteps faded, but the warmth of his words stayed. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him smiling under the evening light, holding the thread and laughing like a boy. Not a rich man, not a stranger, but someone who saw her. And far away in his quiet mansion, David sat on his bed, staring at his phone, his lips curved in a smile. He whispered her name softly into the stillness. Mara. Rain clouds gathered above Laros, turning the sky silver. The air smelled of wet earth and thunder. In the heart of Makoko, Mara worked quietly at her sewing table, her fingers moving fast, though her heart felt heavy. She hadn't seen David for days. Each time a footstep echoed near her hut, she looked up hoping, and each time it wasn't him. She tried to sew away the thought, but he was everywhere in her memory, in her laughter, in the way her heart raced when the evening breeze passed. Then one stormy afternoon, just as she was packing up her sewing things, she heard a familiar voice call her name. "Mara." She turned sharply. And there he was. David, running through the rain, water splashing around his feet, holding something close to his chest to keep it dry. "David," she cried, half laughing, half scolding. "You'll get drenched." He smiled breathlessly. "I don't care. I needed to see you." Mara froze for a second. The rain fell harder, the sound filling the air like music. "But," she asked softly. "Because," he said, stepping closer. "Some people you just can't stay away from." He handed her the wrapped bundle. Inside was a folded drawing, a small, beautiful sketch of a shop front with her name written across the top. Mara's touch. "What's this?" she asked, her voice shaking. "It's your mother's dream," he said. "And yours too. I bought the old shop she once owned. I want to help you rebuild it. Let's bring her dream, your dream, back to life." Mara stared at him, the paper trembling in her hands. "David, why would you do this for me?" He looked into her eyes, rain running down his face like tears. "Because you gave me something I didn't know I was missing. Real kindness. You helped my father without knowing who he was. You saw a person, not a price." Mara's heart pounded. The sky rumbled above and thunder rolled far away. "David," she whispered, "you don't have to do all this." He stepped even closer, his voice low and tender. "I want to, Mara, because somewhere between those visits, those laughs, and those shared corns, I fell in love with you." Her breath caught. She didn't know whether to cry or smile. So she did both. "I thought," she said trembling, "that people like you don't fall for girls like me." David smiled softly. "Then let's prove the world wrong." 2 months later, a new sign shone proudly on a busy street. Mara's touch, fine sewing and designs. The shop's front was bright, filled with laughter and the hum of sewing machines. Inside, Mara stood by the window in a simple yellow dress, smiling as she threaded a needle. Chief Okon entered with his cane, his eyes glowing with pride. "You've made this place a home, my dear," Mara bowed slightly. "It's all because you both believed in me, sir." At that moment, David walked in carrying flowers. "We believed in you," he said softly, handing them to her. Then right there, among the fabric rolls and sunlight, David knelt, not with a ring, but with a small golden needle. "Mara," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "This needle once mended torn cloth. But today I wanted to join two hearts. Will you let our worlds be sewn together forever?" Tears filled her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. Chief Okon clapped his hands joyfully. "Ah, the girl by the roadside has become the light in our home." Mara laughed through her tears as David rose and hugged her gently. The world outside kept moving, noisy, busy, careless. But inside that little shop, love had stitched two very different lives into one beautiful story. When news of the engagement spread, the city buzzed like a restless hive. Headlines flashed across screens and newspapers screamed bold words, "Billionaire's son to wed slum girl." From the gutter to the mansion, love or strategy? Makoko Taylor charms the air. People whispered in offices and on social media. Some laughed, some pied, some called it a mistake. But inside Chief Okon's mansion, the noise of the world never reached them. David didn't read a single paper. Mar didn't check her phone. Chief Okon saw the tabloids and smiled quietly. "Let them talk," he said. "When truth speaks, lies become silent." And the truth was simple. David and Mara were in love. The wedding day arrived beneath a soft golden sky. The church was filled with laughter, music, and flowers that carried the scent of rain. Chief Okon walked proudly beside Mara, his steps slow but strong. "You remind me of your mother, my dear," he whispered. "The same courage, the same heart." Mara smiled, tears filling her eyes. "Thank you, sir, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." At the altar, David waited, calm, handsome, and full of quiet joy. When he saw her walking toward him, his breath caught. She wasn't the poor girl by the roadside anymore. She was the woman who had stitched his heart back together. When Mara reached him, he took her hand gently and said, "I don't care what the world calls you. You'll always be the girl who stopped when everyone else walked away." Mara smiled through her tears. "And you'll always be the man who saw me when I thought I was invisible." The priest smiled. "Then it seems love has already done its work." As they exchanged vows, the sunlight broke through the clouds, bathing the room in gold. Chief Okon watched them, his eyes misty but full of peace. When the ceremony ended, reporters still waited outside, cameras flashing, questions flying. But David only held Mara's hand tighter. "Let them write what they want," he whispered. "Our story began by the roadside. And that's where love found us first." Mara leaned her head on his shoulder. "And that's where love will always lead us home." Chief Okon smiled proudly as they stepped into the car, flower petals falling all around. He turned to his aide and said softly, "They mocked her for where she came from. But one day they'll tell their daughters to be just like her." The car drove away, leaving behind the noise, the cameras, and the doubt, carrying with it a love that had begun with a single act of kindness on a busy Lego street. Sometimes destiny doesn't knock at the door. Sometimes it lies quietly by the roadside, waiting for someone kind enough to stop. If you enjoyed this story, my friend, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart.